Kia ora and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to continue our series looking at the spells that are the same in Pathfinder 2e and D&D 5th edition. The spells we are going over today will be Barkskin, Black Tentacles, Blade Barrier, Bless, Blindness and Deafness, Blink, Blur, Burning Hands and Calm Emotions. So first, I'd like to have a bit of a plug for an upcoming Kickstarter run by an Auckland group over here in New Zealand, and I'd like to pass it over to Annabelle to tell you all about this amazing product she is launching.
It is coming. It has returned. The second Kickstarter. Welcome to Modular Realms, home of magnetic, flat-pack, double-sided terrain. With these terrain pieces, you can build up dungeons on the fly as your players are discovering them. With the magnetic terrain, I can easily remove walls. Ye gods, put it back! Put it back! Put them back. If a player triggers a trap, oh no, I can quickly change the terrain out for something else. Seriously? This Kickstarter has pledges of both our classic terrain, and also there are lots of other add-ons to choose from. With the Wall Dungeon Lord, you can build complex dungeon networks on the go, or rearrange them to make something completely different. With our new, patent-pending magnetic design, each piece is able to connect to every other piece regardless of orientation. This is because we have magnets that spin within the sockets. It is so satisfying. All the terrain was designed by me to be everything that I want and need as a dungeon master. What are you doing here? Bring your games to life with Modular Realms.
This is an amazingly awesome looking system, so I'd recommend you guys head over to Kickstarter and give these guys a bit of love. Now, before we get into the spells, I'd like to go over some of the comments from the last video I'd done and basically add a new section in called What Paul Got Wrong. It's not really what I got wrong, it's just my interpretation of certain rules could be different to other people's, so I'd like to give a shout out to those who commented and, you know, how different spells react differently, all that sort of stuff. So the first comment came from the local disaster tour guide. Fun video, thank you for that. 2 notes. First, any Pathfinder spell can be heightened, even if they don't have a specific listed bonus for doing so. While this may seem strange, it does mean that the spell gains any associated benefits from using the higher spell slot. So what this means is, as it states in Anti-Magic Field, spells of a high level in Anti-Magic Field overcome its effects. It can even be cast by a creature within that field. As you can see, Anti-Magic Field is a level 8 spell. So casting it at level 8, anybody who casts a level 9 or a level 10 spell automatically overcomes the Anti-Magic Field. However, if a spellcaster could cast it at level 9, then level 9 spells are counted in the Anti-Magic Field and can no longer be in effect. Same, if you cast it at level 10, you suddenly encompass all spells of all levels, as level 10 is the highest. So this is what he means by any Pathfinder spell can be heightened. This also works for spells such as Dispel Magic. If you cast Dispel Magic at a level 10, you will dispel any magic. It also works for stuff like Bless and Bane, where Bless says Bless will counter Bane, and Bane says Bane will counter Bless. Well, what this means is if you have 2 casters casting it, one casting Bane, one casting Bless, they're at the same level. In the middle, there's going to be a zone where they intersect and nothing happens. However, if say a level 3 cleric is casting Bless at level 2, well, that's going to overcome Bane, and Bless will actually be the superior spell. So this will work for stuff like Alarm. Alarm can actually be countered by stuff like Dispel Magic. However, you cast Alarm at level 10, even a caster casting a level 9 Anti-Magic Field or Dispel Magic will not actually cancel Alarm. Bane and Bless, as I said before, Lock and Knock. It says that Lock counters Knock, Knock counters Lock, that sort of stuff. Well, if I put a level 8 Lock spell on and somebody casts Knock at level 3, that's not actually going to unlock it. It also works for stuff like Detect Alignment and Undetectable Alignment. These two spells, you can counteract them by casting them at higher levels. So thank you for that. The second note he also said is for put longer videos like this, timestamps are really helpful. Thank you, I have actually put the timestamps in and I'll continue to do so for longer videos. The next comment is from Benjamin Anderson. Persistent damage in Pathfinder 2e is not removed by spending an action, but rather at the end of each turn with a DC 15 flat check. This results sometimes in immediately being cleansed, or occasionally minutes of damage if you have a particularly bad roll. Also noted for the alarm spell, you said 3 gold point focuses, plural. It's unclear if you knew it, but a one-time 3 gold purchase of a silver bell can be used forever. I was not actually aware of that. I thought every time you cast Alarm, you would have to spend 3 gold instead of a one-off purchase. So thank you for that. And the persistent damage he's talking about, well, Acid Splash and Acid Arrow both had persistent damage. As you can see, I rated it higher because the persistent damage can build up over time, and I thought if you action locked a creature, it would stop it from being able to actually remove the persistent damage. That's not quite correct. In fact, they have a 1 in 4 chance of completely removing the effect even if they do nothing in their turn. I still think it's pretty good having persistent damage on. However, he's right, if they use an action, then it drops it down to a DC 10 roll, and if someone helps, it's a DC 5 roll. So yeah, persistent damage, I still think it is pretty good, but you can't always rely on the player actually having a bad roll. Sometimes they're just going to get good rolls and, you know, they will automatically remove the persistent damage. Sometimes you may do the same. So yep, he's right. Thank you very much for that information, Benjamin. The next one is Kai He. Sorry if I said that wrong. It feels like you mistreated Bane a little bit for Pathfinder. Once per turn, starting at the turn after you cast Bane, you can use a single action that has the Concentrate trait. This increases the radius by 5 feet and forces enemies in the area that weren't yet affected to attempt another saving throw, and Bane can counteract Bless. So in gameplay terms, the party wants to put Bane onto the rat, that way it will not be able to hit the fighter. The cleric is standing behind the fighter, so for the very first time she casts Bane, it's not actually going to affect the rat at all. However, on her next turn, she uses one action which sustains the spell. It automatically goes for a minute, but by using the sustain action, it grows the AoE of Bane, and now it is affecting the rat. The rat now has a -1 on its attack rolls when it is trying to affect the fighter. The other thing to look out for is a +1 or a -1 in Pathfinder is actually more valuable than it is in D&D, and this is because of the different degrees of success and effects that Pathfinder has. So on page 445 and 446 of the core rulebook, you have, many times it's important to determine not only if you succeed or fail, but how spectacularly you succeed or fail. Exceptional results, either good or bad, can cause you to critically succeed or critically fail a check. You critically succeed a check when the check's result meets or exceeds the DC by 10 or more. If the check is an attack roll, this is called a critical hit. You can also critically fail a check. The rules for a critical fail, sometimes called a fumble, are the same as those for a critical success, but in the other direction. If you fail the check by 10 or more, it is a critical failure. So putting that into perspective for Bane, let's have a look at our scenario here. Our champion's AC is 16, the rat's attack roll is +7. So for the rat to hit, they only have to hit on a 9 or higher, which is a 60% chance. But this also means that for them to crit, they can crit on a 19 or 20, which means a 10% chance to crit. Well, we hit them with Bane, and suddenly they get a -1 to their attack roll, which puts their attack roll at +6. This means now they have a 55% chance to hit, which is a 10 or higher, but their crit chance is actually only 5%. They have halved their chance to get a crit, which does actually in the long run count for way less damage. So all that does make Bane and Bless a little bit better than what I thought it was. However, comparing it to D&D, where D&D you actually get to affect more than just your chance to hit, yeah, I'm still going to give it in D&D's favour. D&D, you get attack rolls and you get saving throws, whereas Pathfinder, it is just the attack roll affected. On to the next comment. This is from Rasley Ford. I think damage is pretty hard to calculate since hit points is different and also crit success and crit failure, but I think it's doable if you consider things like 6d6 and 8d6 are roughly the same damage. Edit, for example, I would consider Acid Arrow a practical draw. That is true, it is really hard to actually judge the characters in Pathfinder and D&D. The example I put through was the Rat and the Ancient Red Dragon. However, in D&D the Ancient Red Dragon is a lot higher level than in Pathfinder. So what I've done is I've gone through the Monsters Manual and the Bestiary, and I have found a monster that is the exact same critical rating. Meet our Pit Fiend. In D&D he has an AC of 19 and 300 hit points. In Pathfinder he has an AC of 46 and 335 hit points. So we've already gone over AC, it's much higher in Pathfinder, but the chance to hit is also much higher. However, the hit points, if you are looking at Pathfinder, then this creature only has 11.7% more hit points in Pathfinder for the same level creature. Now, if we have a look at the Acid Arrow, if we max it out to our top level, which is level 9 in D&D and level 10 in Pathfinder, in D&D it is 11d4 plus 9d4. So minimum damage is 20, maximum damage is 80, average damage will be around 50. The Acid Arrow in Pathfinder is 11d8 plus 4d6. So your minimum damage will be 15, which is a little bit lower. However, your maximum damage is actually 102. This is 27.5% greater than the maximum damage in D&D. And your average damage is 63.5, which is 27% higher than it is in D&D. So creatures tend to not have as much hit points in Pathfinder. They have a higher armor class and all that sort of stuff, but they don't have this level more damage. This is, 27% more damage on average in Pathfinder for a creature that will only have 11% more health. So I still think, judging it based on that, Pathfinder damage is superior, especially as Pathfinder health is not as superior. And the last one we're going to have a look at today is in Profit. I would say the bonus action is closer to a single action in Pathfinder 2e. Also, single action is better than bonus action spells in my honest opinion, because they do not prevent you from casting other leveled spells in Pathfinder like bonus action spells in 5e do. So what this is in D&D you have the rule bonus action. A spell cast with a bonus action is exceptionally swift. You must use a bonus action on your turn to cast the spell, provided that you haven't already taken a bonus action this turn. But you can't cast another spell during this turn, except for a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action. So that means effectively you can cast a bonus action spell, but you can't follow it up with another ordinary spell. It must be a cantrip. So let us have a look at this particular scenario. The party have battled their way to a bridge, spell slots are a little bit lower at this point, and guarding this bridge is a fire giant. Well, the sorcerer, they have a spell attack of 19 for being level 10, plus at this stage they should be an expert spellcaster. However, the giant has a fortitude save of 33. This means to hit, they have a 35% chance to hit, and a 5% chance to crit. Why are we looking at fort DC and that sort of stuff? Well, our sorcerer here only has a spell slot available at level 1 and a spell slot available at level 2. And obviously they have all their cantrips. So their bloodline grants them occultic spells. Well, what the sorcerer can do is they want to basically use their level 2 spell of telekinetic maneuver to push the giant off the bridge. As a DM, if they got creative, I'd let them do this. Well, they don't have much of a chance to do it. They only have a 35% chance on a single roll of a dice with a 5% crit chance. They want to use their level 10 feat quickened casting. They haven't done this before, which basically means if your next action is to cast a sorcerer cantrip or a sorcerer spell that is at least 2 levels lower than your highest level spell slot, you reduce the number to cast by 1. This is going to mean telekinetic maneuver is now a 1 action cast. With that, they can cast the guidance cantrip. This gives them a +1 status bonus on the next attack roll they make. They then will cast the level 1 spell, True Strike. So this has effectively given them advantage on their spell roll, meaning they roll 2d20 and take the higher level. Now they're going to cast telekinetic maneuver. Instead of, as we saw, their hit to be 35 with a crit chance of 5%, they are now getting a to hit chance of 40 with still a crit of 5%, but they're rolling 2d20 to do it. This gives them a lot higher chance to roll the numbers they need in order to push the giant off the bridge. You can do action economy in Pathfinder to be able to cast 3 spells per turn. So yeah, I do agree with that. From now on, I am going to be marking them the way you have suggested. So thank you to all those who put comments in. I do read every comment and I do take them on board, and yeah, from now on, if you comment on there, I might actually put your comment onto the video. Let's have a look at our very first spell of today, Barkskin. So for D&D, this is a level 2 spell, casting time of 1 action, and it is a range of touch. It is vocal, somatic and material components with no cost to it. The duration is concentration for an hour, and it reads, you touch a willing creature. Until the spell ends, the target's skin has a rough, bark-like appearance, and the target's AC can't be less than 16, regardless of what kind of armor they are wearing. For Pathfinder, we have Barkskin as a level 2 spell. Its traditions are primal. Its casting time are 2 actions, and it requires somatic and verbal components. Its range is touch, and it targets 1 willing creature for a duration of 10 minutes that doesn't require concentration. It reads, the target's skin becomes covered in bark. The target gains a resistance 2 to bludgeoning and piercing damage, and a weakness 3 to fire. After the target takes fire damage, it can dismiss the spell as a free action, triggered by taking the damage. Doing so doesn't reduce the fire damage the target was dealt. And every 2 levels, so that will be at a spell level 4, 6, 8 and 10, the resistance is increased by 2 and the weakness is increased by 3. So let's have a look at how they rank. Both have access to the spell at level 2, meaning this is a draw. Access, for D&D it is Druids, Rangers, Nature Domain Clerics also have access to this, and Circle of the Land Forest Druids have it for free. For Pathfinder, this is a primal spell, so this is a win for D&D. Its range and target are touch for both, so this will be a draw. Casting time is 1 action for D&D, 2 actions for Pathfinder. Once again, this is a draw. Casting components is vocal, somatic and material for D&D, whereas vocal and somatic for Pathfinder, so this is a win for Pathfinder. Its effect, the target's AC is set to 16 in D&D, whereas Pathfinder you get a +2 resistance to bludgeoning and piercing, but you also get a weakness 3 fire. So I'm giving this one a win to D&D. The duration for D&D is concentration for 1 hour, so that means for the entire hour you can't cast any other spells that require concentration, whereas Pathfinder it is a 10-minute duration and it requires no concentration. This is a win for Pathfinder. I know D&D has a longer duration, but it requires concentration, so Pathfinder, even though it's a duration of 10 minutes, this is enough for 1 combat as well as a bit of exploration, and it doesn't require concentration. So, win for Pathfinder. The heightened, D&D doesn't have a heightened level, whereas Pathfinder, it is every 2 levels, you get a resistance +2, but you do get a weakness for +3. So I'm going to call this a win for Pathfinder, simply because D&D there is no actual heightened version. And the saves, there are no saves as it doesn't require a save, so I'm going to call this a draw. Okay, so this here is a grand total of 6 ticks for D&D, 7 ticks for Pathfinder. That makes Pathfinder the winner for Barkskin. Next on our list is Black Tentacles. So for D&D, this is a 4th level spell. It requires 1 action to cast, and it has a range of 90 feet and an AoE of 20 feet. Its components are vocal, somatic and material, and its duration is concentration for 1 minute. And the save for this is a dex save. So, squimmering ebony tentacles fill a 20-foot square on the ground that you can see within range. For the duration, these tentacles turn the ground in the area into difficult terrain. When a creature enters the affected area for the first time on a turn, or starts its turn there, the creature must succeed on a dexterity save and throw or take 3d6 bludgeoning damage, and can be restrained by the tentacles until the spell ends. A creature that starts its turn in the area and is already restrained by the tentacles takes 3d6 bludgeoning damage. A creature restrained by the tentacles can use its action to make a strength or dexterity check, its choice, against your spell save DC. On a success, it frees itself. For Pathfinder, Black Tentacles is a level 5 spell available for the arcane and occult practitioners. Its casting time is 3 actions, and it requires material, somatic and verbal components. It has a range of 120 feet and a 10-foot burst adjacent to a flat surface, and its duration is 1 minute without concentration. Oily black tentacles rise up and attempt to grapple each creature in the area. Make a spell attack roll against the fortitude DC of each creature. Any creature that you succeed against is grabbed and takes 3d6 bludgeoning damage. Whenever a creature ends its turn in the area, the tentacles attempt to grab that creature if they haven't already, and they deal 1d6 bludgeoning damage to any creature already grabbed. The tentacle's escape DC is equivalent to your spell DC. A creature can attack a tentacle in an attempt to release its grip. Its AC is equal to your spell DC, and it is destroyed if it takes 12 or more damage. Even if destroyed, additional tentacles continue to grow in the area for the duration. You can dismiss the spell. So, for the levels, D&D has access to this at level 4, Pathfinder at level 3. This means it is a win for D&D. Access. For D&D, this is the Wizard, and the Great Old One Warlock has access to it. However, Pathfinder, Arcane and Occult practitioners have access to it, as well as an Aberrant Sorcerer getting it for free, and 3 different gods give the Clerics and Champions access to the spell as well. So, with all that access, I'm calling this a win for Pathfinder. The range and target, D&D is 90 foot with a 20-foot burst, whereas Pathfinder is 120 foot with a 20-foot burst. Both have the same AoE, however Pathfinder is a longer range, so that is a win for Pathfinder. Casting time, it is 1 action for D&D, whereas it is 3 actions for Pathfinder, so this is a win for D&D. Both have vocal, somatic and material casting components. This would make it a draw. The effect, the ground becomes difficult terrain in D&D. It is also accompanied by 3d6 damage and restrained creatures take an additional 3d6 damage on their turn. The effect for Pathfinder is 3d6 damage and the grabbed creatures take 1d6 damage on their turn. So more damage for D&D as well as the difficult terrain means this is a win for D&D. The duration, concentration for 1 minute for D&D, whereas 1 minute without concentration for Pathfinder. This is a win for Pathfinder. None have heightened effects, so I'm going to call this a draw. And the save, it is a dex save to miss all damage, followed by a strength or dexterity save once you're grabbed to escape it for D&D, whereas Pathfinder, it is a spell attack versus fortitude save to be affected, and it is an armor class equivalent to your spell DC, and the tentacles take 12 hit points in order to stop being grabbed. So for this, I'm actually going to give this one a win for Pathfinder. It is a bit easier to afflict this upon creatures, and the simple fact that they must actually start attacking in order to be able to break out, so they have to be able to attack it as well as do enough damage to destroy the tentacle and then walk out of it. I'm calling it a win for Pathfinder. So this is 5 ticks for D&D, whereas it is 6 ticks for Pathfinder. I'm calling this a win for Pathfinder. Our third spell for today is Blade Barrier. For D&D, this is a level 6 spell. Its casting time is 1 action, and it has a range of 90 feet. Its components are vocal and somatic, and it's concentrate for 10 minutes. The save for this will be a dex save. You create a vertical wall of whirling razor-sharp blades made of magical energy. The wall appears within range and lasts for the duration. You can make a straight-up wall of 100 feet long, 20 feet high and 5 feet thick, or a ringed wall up to 60 feet in diameter, 20 feet high and 5 feet thick. The wall provides 3/4 cover to creatures behind it, and its space is difficult terrain. When a creature enters the wall's area for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there, a creature must make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 6d10 slashing damage. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage. And this is available to clerics. The Pathfinder Blade Barrier is a spell level 6. Its traditions are divine only. Its casting time is 3 actions and it requires material, somatic and verbal components. Its range is 120 feet. The duration is 1 minute without concentration. It reads, Blades of Force form a churning wall. The wall is a straight line 20 feet high, 100 feet long and 2 inches thick, and it provides cover. The wall deals 7d8 force damage to each creature that's in the wall space when it is created, and that attempt to pass through the wall, or that ends its turn inside the wall. A basic reflex save reduces the damage. A creature that succeeds at this save when the wall is created is pushed to the nearest space on the side of its choice. Creatures trying to move through the wall fail to do so if they critically fail the save, ending their movement adjacent to the wall. And its damage, it goes up by 1d8 for every level you cast it at. So that'll be an extra 1d8 at 7th level, 2d8 at 8th, 3d8 at 9th, and 4d8 at 10th. Its rankings both have access to it at level 6. This means it is a drawer. Access is D&D, the clerics have access to it, and Pathfinder Divine Practitioners have access to it. The Angelic Bloodline for Sorcerers get this one for free, so I'm actually going to call this a drawer. Range and target, it is 90 feet for the range for D&D, whereas it's 120 feet for Pathfinder, so I'm calling this one a win for Pathfinder. Casting time is 1 action for D&D, 3 actions for Pathfinder, that is a win for D&D. Casting components, it is only vocal and somatic for D&D, whereas Pathfinder requires an extra material component. This is a win for D&D again. Its effects, D&D you have a 20 foot by 100 foot by 5 foot wall, or a ring of 60 feet that's 20 feet high and 5 feet thick. It provides half cover and difficult terrain, and it will do 6d10 slashing damage to all creatures who are affected by the wall. Pathfinder, it is a 120 foot long wall that is 20 feet high but only 2 inches thick. It provides cover but only does 7d8 force damage to any creatures that are touched by it, so I'm calling this, with the direct damage and the fact that you can make it a ring, a win for D&D. Its duration, D&D requires concentration but can maintain it for 10 minutes, Pathfinder maintains it for 1 minute without concentration. I'm calling this a win for Pathfinder simply because of the concentration. The heightened effect, D&D doesn't heighten it at all, but it is an extra 1d8 damage for Pathfinder per level, so this is a win for Pathfinder. And the save, it is a dexterity save versus a basic reflex save. I'm going to call this one a draw for both, as reflex is based off your dexterity. So with 6 ticks per side, this is the first draw we have for today, and yeah, both are pretty decent spells. Draw for each. Now we can move on to Bane's nemesis, Bless. For D&D, this is a level 1 spell. Its casting time is 1 action, it has a range of 30 feet. The components are vocal, somatic and material, with a duration of 1 minute concentration. You bless up to 3 creatures of your choice within range. Whenever a target makes an attack roll or a saving throw before the spell ends, the target can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the attack or saving throw. And at higher levels, you get to target 1 additional creature for each slot above first. And this is available for clerics, paladins, and the life domain cleric gets it for free. Pathfinder, this is a level 1 spell as well. Its traditions are divine and occultic. Its casting time is 2 actions with somatic and verbal components required. Its area is a 5 foot emanation from you, and it targets you and allies in the area. Its duration is 1 minute without concentration. Blessings from Beyond help your companions strike true. You and your allies in the area gain a +1 status bonus to attack rolls. Once per turn, starting the turn after you cast Bless, you can use a single action which has the Concentrate trait to increase the emanation's radius by 5 feet. Bless can counteract Bane. So the rankings for this one, both have access to it at level 1, meaning this will be a draw. For the access, it is a Cleric or Paladin spell, with Life Domain Clerics getting access to it for free for D&D, whereas Divine and Occult Practitioners in Pathfinder all have access to it. The range and target, for D&D it is a 30-foot range with 3 targets, and for Pathfinder it is a 5-foot emanation targeting you. So this will be a win for D&D. Casting time, it is 1 action versus 2 actions. I'm going to call this one a draw. Casting components, vocal, somatic and material for D&D, vocal and somatic for Pathfinder. Win for Pathfinder. The effect, it is a D4 to all attack rolls and saving throws for D&D, whereas for Pathfinder it is a +1 attack bonus, and you can concentrate to expand the emanation by 5 feet. I'm still going to give this one a win for D&D, simply because a D4 to both attack rolls and saving throws I think is better than just a +1 to attack rolls, as it affects saving throws. Duration, it is concentration for 1 minute for D&D, whereas it's just 1 minute for Pathfinder. This is a win for Pathfinder. And the heightened, +1 creature per spell level for D&D. If you have a party of 4, then you're not going to need to heighten it any higher than level 2 to be able to target everybody. Pathfinder, it doesn't have any actual heightened level, but if you cast it at a higher level, it will counteract Bane at lower levels, as well as it will be harder to dispel with effects like Dispel Magic and Anti-Magic Field. I'm still going to give this one a win to D&D, simply because you can target more creatures. Neither have a save, so that is a draw. So taking all that into effect, this would mean Bless is actually a draw for both of them. Now for the 5th spell, Blindness and Deafness. For D&D, this is a 2nd level spell. Its casting time is 1 action with a range of 30 feet, and it only requires vocal components. Its duration is 1 minute, its save is a Constitution save, and it is available for the Bard, Cleric, Sorcerer, Wizard, Death Domain Clerics get it for free, Circle of Spore Druids have access to it, and the Fiend and the Undying and the Undead all have access to it for the Warlocks. You can blind or deafen a foe. Choose 1 creature that you can see within range to make a Constitution saving throw. If it fails, the target is either blinded or deafened. This is your choice. At the end of each of its turns, the target can make a Constitution saving throw, and on a success, the spell ends. At heightened level, when you cast the spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, you can target 1 additional creature for every slot. Now for Pathfinder, this is actually split into 2 separate spells. So Blindness is accessible at level 3 for all traditions, and Deafness at level 2 for all traditions. Both have a casting time of 2 actions, and both require somatic and verbal components. The range for both is 30 feet, targeting 1 creature, and the saving throw for both is Fortitude. For Blindness, you blind the target. The effect is determined by the target's Fortitude save, and then the target is immune for 1 minute. On a critical success, the target is unaffected. On a success, the target is blinded until its next turn begins. On a failure, the target is blinded for a minute, and on a critical failure, the target is blinded permanently. Deafness, the target loses hearing. It must attempt a Fortitude save. Then the target is temporarily immune for 1 minute. On a crit, it is unaffected. On a success, it is deafened for 1 round. Note that this is deafened for 1 round, which means it will be your next turn when it becomes undeafened, not its next turn, the same way as Blindness. On a failure, it is deafened for 10 minutes, and on a crit failure, the target is deafened permanently. Now it's time for the rankings. For the level, D&D has access to this at level 2, whereas Pathfinder has Deafness at level 2, but Blindness is a level 3 spell. This is a win for D&D. The access, there is a large list of people who have access to it in D&D. This is the Bard, Cleric, Sorcerer and Wizard, with Death Domain Clerics getting it for free. And the other subclasses are Circle of the Spore Druids, and then the Fiends, the Undying and the Undead Warlocks. Whereas Pathfinder, everyone has access to it. This will make it a win for Pathfinder. The range and target both are a range of 30 feet targeting one creature. This will be a draw. Casting time, 1 action v 2 actions. This will be a draw again. Casting component, this is only vocal for D&D, whereas it's vocal and somatic for Pathfinder, so this is a win for D&D. The effect, it is blind or deafened for D&D. This is the caster's choice, whereas it's the same for Pathfinder, but being split into 2 separate spells. I'm going to call this a win for D&D. Duration, it is 1 minute solid for D&D, whereas Pathfinder, if they critically succeed, they are not affected, but even if they succeed, they are affected for a round, and if they critically fail, they have that effect permanently. So I'm going to call this one a win for Pathfinder. Heightened, no heightening for Pathfinder, whereas more creatures for D&D. I'm calling this a win for D&D. And the save, it's a Constitution save versus a Fortitude save. Fort saves are based off con anyway, so I'm going to call this a draw. So with 7 in D&D's favour to the 5 that Pathfinder has, this is a win for D&D. Now we move on to Blink. Blink is a 3rd level spell for D&D, cast in time of 1 action, range is self, components are verbal and somatic, and duration is 1 minute. And this will be available for sorcerers, wizards, artificers, and the subclasses are the Trickery Domain Cleric, the Archfey, and the Hexblade Warlocks. Roll a d20 at the end of each of your turns for the duration of a spell. On a roll of 11 or higher, you vanish from your current plane of existence and appear in the ethereal plane. The spell fails and the casting is wasted if you are already on that plane. At the start of your next turn, and when the spell ends, if you are on the ethereal plane, you return to an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within 10 feet of the space you vanished from. If no unoccupied space is available within that range, you appear in the nearest unoccupied space, choosing at random if more than one space is equally near. You can dismiss this spell as an action. While on the ethereal plane, you can hear and see the plane you originated from, which is cast in shades of grey, and you can't see or hear anything more than 10 feet away. You can only affect and be affected by other creatures on the ethereal plane. Creatures that aren't there can't perceive you or interact with you unless they have the ability to do so. For Pathfinder, this is a level 4 spell that is available to arcane and occultic traditions. Its casting time is 2 actions and it requires somatic and verbal, and the duration is 1 minute. You blink quickly between the material plane and the ethereal plane. You gain a resistance 5 to all damage except force damage, and you can sustain the spell to vanish and reappear 10 feet away in a random direction determined by the GM. The movement doesn't trigger reactions, and at the end of your turn you vanish and appear as above. And every time you heighten the spell, your resistance goes up by 3 for every 2 levels you heighten it. So for the rankings, the level is level 3 for D&D, level 4 for Pathfinder. This will be a win for D&D. The access is sorcerers, wizards and artificers, with the Trickery Domain Cleric and Archfey and Hexblade Warlocks having access to it for D&D, and arcane and occult practitioners for Pathfinder. This will be a win for Pathfinder. Target and range is self for both. This will be a draw. Cast and time is 1 action versus 2 action. This is also a draw. Cast and components is vocal and somatic for D&D, vocal and somatic for Pathfinder. This is once again a draw. The effect is blink between the material and ethereal plane in D&D, and pretty much the same thing in Pathfinder, but when you reappear you get a damage resistance. So I'm calling this a win for Pathfinder simply because of that damage resistance. Duration is 1 minute for both. This is going to be a draw. Heightened, D&D doesn't have a heightened version, whereas Pathfinder You get a +3 resistance every 2 levels, maxing out at 14 resistance if you cast this at level 10. This is a win for Pathfinder. And D&D and Pathfinder don't have any saves as this is a spell affecting you, so I'm calling this a draw. And here we have the rankings. This is one more win for Pathfinder. We can now move to spell number 7, Blur. For D&D, this is a 2nd level spell. Cast in time of 1 action, range and target is yourself, components is verbal, it has duration of 1 minute concentration, and sorcerers, wizards, artificers, the Circle of the Land Desert, and the Hexblade and Genie Warlocks all have access to it. Your body becomes blurred, shifting and wavering to all those who see you. For the duration, any creature has disadvantage on attack rolls against you. An attacker is immune to this effect if it doesn't rely on sight, as with blind sight, or it can see through illusions, as with true sight. In Pathfinder, this is a level 2 spell available to the arcane and occultic traditions. Its cast time is 2 actions and it requires somatic and verbal components. Its range is touch and it targets 1 creature. The duration is 1 minute. The target's form appears blurry. It becomes concealed. As the nature of this effect still leaves the target's location obvious, the target can't use this concealment to hide and seek. So now we can rank Blur. Both systems have access to this at level 2, meaning this is a draw. For D&D, sorcerers, wizards and artificers, as well as the Circle of Land Desert and Hexblade and Genie Warlocks all have access to this, whereas arcane and occultic practitioners have access to this for Pathfinder. This is a win for Pathfinder. For D&D, the target is yourself. For Pathfinder, you can actually touch 1 creature. You can be that creature you touch, but you can actually put blur on other creatures, so this will be a win for Pathfinder. The casting time is 1 action versus 2 actions. This is a draw. Components for D&D is verbal only, whereas Pathfinder it's verbal and somatic. This is a win for D&D. The effect, D&D has disadvantage on any attack rolls made against you, whereas Pathfinder you simply become concealed. Now for Pathfinder, if you want to target a concealed creature, you must roll a DC 5 flat check. If you get 6 or above, you can target the creature. 1 to 5, you do not target the creature. So on that, I am going to give advantage to the disadvantage and give the win to D&D. Duration, concentration for 1 minute for D&D, whereas it's 1 minute without concentration for Pathfinder. This will be a win for Pathfinder. The heightened version and the save, there is no heightening or saving in Pathfinder or D&D, so this will be a draw. So as we can see, 6 ticks for D&D as opposed to 7 ticks for Pathfinder. That makes Blur a better spell in Pathfinder. We can now move to my wife's favourite spell for her pyromantic goblin, Burning Hands. In D&D, this is a 1st level spell requiring 1 action to cast. This is cast on yourself, but it has a cone of 15 feet, and it requires vocal and somatic components. This is available for sorcerers and wizards, with the Light Domain Cleric and Circle of Wildfire Druid having access to it, as well as the Fiend and Genie Warlocks. As you hold out your hands with your thumb touching your fingers spread, a thin sheet of flames shoots from both your outstretched fingertips. Each creature in a 15-foot cone must make a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 3d6 fire damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. The fire ignites any flammable objects in the area that aren't being worn or carried. And at higher levels, when you cast this spell using a slot 2 or higher, the damage is increased by 1d6 for each slot above the 1st level. For Pathfinder, this is a level 1 spell. The traditions are arcane and primal, and it takes 2 actions to cast, requiring somatic and verbal components. The area is yourself and a 15-foot cone from yourself, and the save and throw will be a basic reflex. Gouts of flame rush from your hands. You deal 2d6 fire damage to creatures in the area, and for each level you heighten it, this damage goes up by 2d6. So for the rankings, both systems have access to this at level 1, meaning this is a draw. For the access, sorcerers, wizards, light domain clerics, circle of wildfire druids, and the fiend and genie warlocks have access to this for D&D, whereas arcane and primal spellcasters have access to this for Pathfinder. This I'm going to give a win to Pathfinder. Range and target is a 15-foot cone starting from yourself. This will be a draw for both systems. Casting time is 1 action versus 2 actions. This will be a win for both. The casting components is vocal and somatic for both, meaning this is a draw. The effects is 3d6 fire damage for D&D. This is between 3 and 18 damage with an average of 10.5, whereas it's 2d6 fire damage for Pathfinder. This is a range of 2 to 12 with an average of 7. I'm going to be given this a win to D&D. Duration, both are instantaneous, both have a draw. The heightened version of this spell, it is only 1d6 per level for D&D, so at maximum level this is 11 to 66 damage with an average of 38.5, whereas it's 2d6 per level for Pathfinder, so this will be at level 10 around 12 to 120 damage with an average of 70. I'm going to give this a win for Pathfinder. And the saves, it is a dex versus a basic reflex. I'm going to be calling this one a draw. So with 7 ticks in D&D's favour versus the 8 ticks for Pathfinder, this makes Burning Hands a better spell in the Pathfinder system. And our last spell for today is Calm Emotions. For D&D, this is a 2nd level spell that requires 1 action to cast. Its range is 60 feet and the area is 20 feet sphere with vocal and somatic components required. The duration is concentration for 1 minute and the save for this is a charisma save. The Bard, Cleric and Oath of Redemption Paladins with the Archfey Warlock all have access to this spell. You attempt to suppress strong emotions in a group of people. Each humanoid in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on the point you choose within range must make a charisma saving throw. A creature can choose to fail the saving throw if it wishes. If a creature fails its saving throw, choose one of the following 2 effects. You can suppress any effect caused by the target to be charmed or frightened. When the spell ends, any suppressed effects resume provided that its duration has not expired in the meantime. Alternatively, you can make a target indifferent about creatures of your choice that is hostile towards it. This indifference ends if the target is attacked or harmed by a spell, or if it witnesses any of its friends being harmed. When the spell ends, the target becomes hostile again, unless the DM rules it otherwise. For Pathfinder, this is a level 2 spell available for Divine and Occultic practitioners. It has a casting cost of 2 actions and requires somatic and verbal components. Its range is 120 feet and its area is a 10-foot burst. The saving throw is willpowered and it's sustained for up to 1 minute. You forcibly calm a creature in the area, soothing them into a non-violent state. Each creature must attempt a will save. On a critical success, the creature is unaffected. On a normal success, calming urges impose a -1 status penalty to all the creature's attack rolls. On a failure, any emotion effects that would affect the creature are suppressed and the creature can't use hostile actions. If the target is subject to hostility by any other creature, it ceases to be affected by calm emotions. And a critical fail is failure, but hostility doesn't end this effect. Now to rank this spell, both systems have access to it at level 2, meaning this is a draw. For the access, it is the Bard, Cleric, Oath of Redemption Paladin and Archfey Warlock for D&D, whereas for Pathfinder it is the Divine and Occultic practitioners, with the Nymph and Psychopomp sorcerers having access to it. I'm actually going to give this a draw, as Divine is clerical magic for the systems, Occultic is bardic magic, and then both have 2 separate subclasses having access to it. Range and target. D&D, it is a 60-foot range, but it's a 20-foot sphere when it hits the target, whereas Pathfinder, it's longer range, at 120 feet, so you can fire it twice as far, but it is only a 10-foot sphere. This is really hard. Both systems, it is double one, half the other, so I'm actually going to give this a draw for both of them. Casting time is 1 action versus 2 actions, this will be a draw. Casting component is both somatic and vocal. this will be a draw as well. Then in D&D, the effect is you can choose one: suppress a charmed or frightened creature, or make hostile creatures indifferent towards you. Whereas Pathfinder, it just calms a creature into non-violence. Basically, because you get the extra effects for D&D, this will be a win for D&D. Both have concentration for 1 minute, so I'm going to give this a draw. Neither have a heightened effect, so this is easily a draw. And for the save for D&D, it is a direct charisma save to completely ignore it. Pathfinder, it is a willpowered save, but it is a variable degrees of success, so as you have a higher chance of getting criticals, you know, worse things happen to the creature. I'm going to give this a win to Pathfinder. So with 8 apiece for Pathfinder and D&D, Calm Emotions is a draw. And as we can see here, Pathfinder wins in Black Tentacles and Barkskin, as well as Blink, Blur and Burning Hands, whereas D&D wins for Blindness and Deafness. And the other 3, Blade Barrier, Bless and Calm Emotions, is a draw. Thank you for joining me as we go through these spells. Don't forget, if you make a comment, I will read the comments. I'll probably comment back to it, and I'll probably put it into the video for the next one. So tell me where I went wrong, tell me what you'd like to see next, and I'll try and put that in for upcoming videos. Don't forget to go over to Modular Realms. Their Kickstarter is live now. Go have a look. It's really fun to play on terrain, especially kit set terrain you can build yourself. So thank you for watching, and ka kite anō.